Welcome to the Reuniting Science and Spirituality Summit, where you'll discover how science and spirituality work together to expand our capacity for healing and transformation. Share this powerful event with your friends and family, and join our conversation on Facebook at The Shift Network. And now your host, Dr. Shamini Jan.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Reuniting Science and Spirituality Summit. We are off to a great start, as you saw, with Drs. Roland McCready and David Musum, and I am so excited to bring to you next Dr. Jude Currivan. Jude is a cosmologist, planetary healer, futurist, and author of 6 books. Most recently, the Nautilus Award-winning book called The Cosmic Hologram. Jude's also a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, and in 2017, she co-founded Wholeworld-view, which is a growing community of global changemakers serving the understanding, experiencing, and embodying of unitary awareness to empower conscious evolution. Jude, thank you so much for joining us today.
Shamini, thank you. It's a delight to be with you as always, and I'm so looking forward to our explorations together today.
Oh, thank you. Me too, Jude. Jude, we've talked many times about how our cosmology and, how our worldview really shapes our reality. And, we've heard about this from things like placebo science, what's called placebo science, mind-body medicine, and all of that. But we've had discussions on, kind of even taking it a step further, the how we literally view the world and the universe, and what we understand about the world and the universe greatly impacts our individual healing and our collective healing. And I was wondering if you could share some insights from your studies so far in all of these wonderful areas of physics and cosmology that help us to better understand how our worldview really shapes our reality.
Well, thank you. And it really does. I mean, on a not just a personal, but on a collective level, our beliefs do drive our behaviors. And we are human beings experiencing a universe that appears materialistic, that appears made up of separate things. And mainstream science has pretty much suggested that that is the way that things really are. But mainstream science describes the appearance of the world. What we're realizing now is a revelation of its deeper, true reality. And that reality is a world that is far more ephemeral than it appears to be, but crucially is not made up of separate things. It's the myth of separation that's driven so much of the way we behave in the world with each other and with our beloved planetary home. So actually healing our fragmented perspectives of the nature of reality itself seems to me to be pivotal in the potential for us both to transform our behaviors, but also to underpin the possibility of our conscious evolution.
So well said. And I'm wondering, what are we learning these days from physics and related disciplines that are helping us to understand, even on the scientific level, how deeply, we are connected?
Before the beginning of the 20th century, our scientific understanding of the nature of the physical world was very mechanistic. But at the beginning of the 20th century, there was a revolution. Quantum physics was discovered, and so was relativity. So the whole of the 20th century has been built on a cosmology that is where energy and matter and space and time have been seen to be fundamental aspects of the reality of the physical world. Just as at the end of the 19th century, where new evidence was coming forward to disprove or certainly expand that limited mechanistic model, so now evidence is coming forward across all scales of existence and numerous fields of research to show us that actually the appearance of energy and matter and space and time aren't fundamental. They're what's called emergent phenomena. They're the appearance of reality that emerges from deeper, non-physical levels of causation. And this is crucial because although we had clues at the beginning of the 20th century of the nature of consciousness with quantum physics and relativity, those clues were sort of pushed to the side. And so the whole of the 20th century was more technological than profoundly scientific in trying to dig deeper into the nature of reality itself. We've now got to a point where we can't avoid the elephant in the room any longer, which is what's consciousness, what is mind. And we're finding with this leading edge science that instead of energy, matter, space, time, the most fundamental stuff of the physical universe is information. Information, digitized information that expresses itself as energy, matter, and space and time. And so we're coming to this perception that just as Sir James Jeans did 100 years ago, and relativity science and quantum physics pioneers like Albert Einstein and Max Planck also intuited and felt that our universe is far more a great thought than it is a great machine. And that has the potential to change everything, because it shows that instead of a materialistic universe made up of separate things, and that somehow over 13.8 billion years, consciousness has arisen as an accident of biological evolution, which itself is filled with accidents, that instead our universe exists and evolves as a unified, essentially thoughtful entity, innately informed, and actually also holographically manifested. So if not just the innately informed and the sense of consciousness enough, we now are understanding from leading edge science how consciousness, cosmic consciousness, actually creates what we call the physical world.
It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And as you know, there have been many ancient theories from, many traditions that have described this in some fashion. But you say that there is science, right? There's actual experiments, explorations, scientific explorations that are leading us to this conclusion. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the ones that really stick in your mind that are helping us to understand that we're coming from, if I understand what you're saying, a vast sea of information, basically, as Deepak would say, limitless possibilities, right? He likes to say that a lot, infinite possibilities. So these possibilities are sort of the sea of what is actual, quote, reality, and then matter, form, and you're saying even time and space arise from that. So how are we even exploring this scientifically? I mean, how do we know? How do we know this? It's amazing. Yeah.
It is amazing. And interestingly enough, I mean, I've experienced the world in this way since I was 4 years old, and experienced this sense of the physical realm, the physical universe, just being part of a much grander and vaster and ultimately infinite cosmos. But you're right. And until recently, there wasn't the evidence. When I started to write The Cosmic Hologram, I was realizing that the evidence and the experiments and the discoveries that I was sharing in the book were sort of dated, many of them even over the last few years, and very few of them going back much more than, say, 10 or 12 years. So this is really a threshold discovery. And Shamini, as you say, it's not just a theoretical framework, it's evidenced, and it's evidenced at all scales of existence. And so things that stick out in my mind, for example, is that we see the same geometric relational patterns playing out at all scales of existence. And these are called fractals. And they are relationships that scale up and scale down. So, for example, we see the same fractal patterns at the atomic scale. So when, for example, an element changes its characteristics from, say, being a metal to an insulator, the electrons of its atoms cluster as fractal patterns. But then when we look far out into space, we find the same fractal patterns across vast webs of galactic clusters. So from the scale of an atom to 3 billion light years across scales of vast galactic structures, we find fractal patterns. We find them at all scales in between. So we see them at the tiniest scales and the largest scales and throughout the natural world. But vitally, we also see them in the patterns of human behaviors. So, for example, the internet and the way we use the internet embodies fractals, patternings, just as biological ecosystems such as the Amazon jungle embodies them. And we also find the same relationships in earthquakes, the frequency and the destructive power of earthquakes, as we do from the scale and the frequency of human conflicts. All of these phenomena arise from deeper non-physical realms of causation. And if we can co-create patterns of conflicts from consciousness, we can also co-create patterns of peace and cooperation from a higher level of coherent consciousness. So those really speak to me. But over the last couple of years, even since the book has been published, more and more evidence is coming forward. So, for example, looking back to the very earliest epoch of our universe, to something called the cosmic microwave background, which is the relic primordial radiation from the first moments of space and time. You know, we call it the Big Bang, but it wasn't big and it wasn't a bang. It was minute and it wasn't chaotic. It was incredibly ordered and exquisitely fine-tuned. But from that beginning, we're able to look throughout space at this relic radiation called the cosmic microwave background. And 2 years ago, astrophysicists discovered exactly the same fractal patterns of the cosmic hologram within the cosmic microwave background. Also, for quantum physics to work at all, and for our universe to exist and evolve as a coherent and unified entity, it also needs to be connected beyond the limits of space-time as a whole. And within space-time, the speed of light is like a cosmic speed limit. So signals can go no faster than the speed of light. And that enables causality to play out, an arrow of time to play out within space-time. But for our universe to exist and evolve in its wholeness, it also needs to be what's called non-locally interconnected. And such non-local interconnection is a natural framework for supernormal phenomena like telepathy and remote viewing. And we've now actually measured that non-locality out to vast distances. So last August, some astrophysicists at MIT were able to non-locally connect photons of light in a laboratory with photons of light from stars 600 light years away to photons of light from what are called quasars, which are earliest, probably the creations of supermassive black holes deep in space, which are incredibly energetic, as far as 12.2 billion years away. So we now can show evidence that non-locality is real as far as 12.2 billion light years away, which is very close to the whole scale of the universe. So all of these pieces of evidence are coming together from many different fields of study to really show that indeed, you know, what I write about and share about in the cosmic hologram is the deeper, truer nature of our physical universe, and therefore offers us a bridge between the seeming separation of non-duality and of duality and the ultimate non-duality of the whole world.
I just want to let that sink in for a minute. You've just shared some really profound insights and evidence with us. And, you know, I just wanted to share too that this pattern of information that we see all the way to the universal level of patterning down to, as you say, the physical level, is so important. I mean, it's just striking me, you know, as you know, Jude, you know, I'm a researcher in the area of psychoneuroimmunology and did some work in psychophysiology. And I remember being fascinated when I learned that some of the ways that we even look at heart rhythms. For example, what's called heart rate variability, right? Which is the dance between our fight and flight sympathetic nervous system and our rest and digest parasympathetic nervous system, right? We know that there's certain aspects of heart rate variability that will tell us how healthy we are. And I found it very interesting that when we looked at these very binned measures of heart rate variability, this or that, for example, it would give us some information. But when we started looking at fractal patterns of heart rate variability, when we started seeing the fractal patterns, we were actually able to predict whether someone with heart disease was going to die. So, just to point out again the real world relevance of the patterning that we're seeing everywhere in the universe, including our own physical bodies. It's quite fascinating. It's amazing. And the research that you were just sharing with us about the fundamental interconnection of photons of light here on Earth being connected with photons of light, what did you say, 12 point something billion?
12.2 billion light years away.
That we've actually shown the interconnection between those photons.
Not just the interconnection, but the absolute entanglement. So those photons, it's not just 12.2 billion light years away, but at the speed of light, it's 12.2 billion. Those photons were radiated from those quasars 12.2 billion years ago.
And so, what does that tell us about the nature of space-time? It's exactly. Mind-blowing. I think to the average person, the idea that time and space are just, not fundamental realities is really challenging, because it's just not the way that we've been brought up to think. And that's why things like nonlocal healing really spook some people out. It feels like fiction, right? And that what you're telling us is there are actually grounds in the cosmological literature that help us to understand these phenomena that we're uncovering, including things like distant healing. And tying together some of that knowledge from cosmology may help us to, again, uncover some of what has been taught for millennia in many different cultures. And in certain cultures had descriptions for the mediums, if you will, of how this stuff worked. So, I'm thinking of, for example, the Vedic terms of akasha, right? Which is it's just translated as non-space. It's non-space from which everything arises. It's where form arises from. And then there are descriptions, for example, about ether, right, as a medium by which communication can happen universally in a way that almost seems invisible to us, and yet it's there. I'm wondering if you'd like to comment on any of those perceptions and the links between what you're saying and what they have said in the past.
Well, very much. We talk about the convergence of science and spirituality, but I think it's actually the integration of science and spirituality. So it is that reuniting, and it's including and transcending both essentially into a cosmology of consciousness. We're now standing on the shoulders of giants, because the Vedic tradition, especially of ancient India, and the Upanishads, which are profound insights into the nature of reality, really this leading edge science is now corroborating those perspectives. That's why, I talk about, rather than the Big Bang, the first moment of space-time of our universe as the first moment of a big breath. And the ancient Vedic traditions talked about the breath of Brahman. And, it's not that our universe isn't real. It is real. But the appearance of it is not its deepest reality. And certainly I think that the appearance of separation, which in one sense helps us to explore, if everything was not differentiated, there would be no way to evolve, there would be no way to experience in the way that we do. But it's misunderstanding the differentiation of unity and the unity expressed in diversity as misunderstanding that as separation. And so that uniting and that remembering both of the wholeness of all that is, but also of the beauty in which unity expresses itself through radical diversity. I mean, our universe is set up in such an incredible way, not just to exist and evolve as a unified entity, but such precision as to exist to evolve. Our universe has this incredible innate evolutionary impulse to evolve from simplicity to complexity. And after 13.8 billion years, here we are having this conversation, which is extraordinary and wondrous that we're even able to have this conversation and now expand our own awareness and consciousness to reunite with the spirituality, the universal spirituality of all ages, verified, validated, and supported by this leading edge science and this new way of seeing reality as a cosmic hologram.
Such important insight that you just shared with us. And it reminds me, I was walking the other day with Dr. Paul Mills, who I know you know, and who will be a guest with us on the summit as well. And Paul and I, when we take walks, we often just stop to notice the plants, especially around us, and we marvel at the diversity in the plant and the beauty in each plant. I mean, it's amazing to think of how each plant has evolved and the beauty that each plant shares and the qualities and how we came to, even understand things about the plants as we observe them. And it strikes me that we could be doing the same thing with people, right? We don't so much, we're, as you say, we've been, kind of fed this separatism dogma instead of, the diversity truth,
Absolutely.
I guess you could say, right? So it's not that we're separate. It's not that we're that different, but we're all facets of the one. And so we could celebrate that and, acknowledge it, hold it into our hearts. It also reminds me of a fundamental principle in Jainism, and I'm sure in many different spiritual traditions. In Jainism, we call it anikantavad, or non-absolutism. That is, that truth is in many facets and many perspectives. There is no one absolute truth because we all are experiencing and embodying it in different ways, just like the plant families are, right, in the animal kingdom. And it's so easy for us to sometimes look at it as an outside observer of those types of species and say, wow, this is really amazing. But then when we come across people that think differently than us, that, that share their faith differently and these kinds of things, then we run into all of these issues of separatism. Now, I know this is something that is very near and dear to your heart because you are, not only a cosmologist, but for lack of a better term, a social activist, right? You care deeply about the world and the unification of the world and the collective realization that, in fact, we are all just a part of the divine dance of oneness sharing itself through, all of our different diverse embodiments, perspectives, personalities, and such. So how do you bring people to a deeper understanding of, how they are embodied oneness in a wonderful, diverse form?
Well, for me, it's not just about understanding this whole worldview. And in the beginning, you mentioned that it's also experiencing and embodying it. And for me, the experience, and I think for everyone, when we begin to experience that oneness, when you walk in nature with Paul, and I know you do this all the time anyway, Shamini, with who you are, you feel that sense of oneness, you feel that sense of wonder. And when we open our hearts to each other, when we empathize with each other, when we, feel love, that is a reminder and a rehearter of the oneness that connects us all. It's when we go into our heads, we're very good at going into our heads and seeing the separation. So it's very much that integration of head and heart where we can then begin to experience this oneness and appreciate, value, celebrate the diversity. So as you say, much of what I'm doing is now, as more and more people are waking up to this remembering of who we really are and the oneness of all that is, we're finding each other. It's rather like, when a caterpillar metamorphosizes into a butterfly, the old caterpillar has to die for the new butterfly to emerge. And what that process is about is that in the cocoon, imaginal cells, as the old caterpillar, the old paradigm of the old caterpillar falls away, imaginal cells of the possibility and the potential of the butterfly begin to manifest. And those imaginal cells, as the process continues, begin to cluster together to form organelles, and eventually the entirety of the butterfly within that template emerges from the cocoon. And I feel that's a metaphor of the process that we collectively are going through now. So as we remember oneness, wholeness, we transcend the myth of separation within ourselves, within our own experience, then we're finding each other and coming together, just as we did a few days ago at the Chi conference, and then the Ions conference, and then the Evolutionary Leaders event. People all around the world who are waking up and beginning to grow up, literally, into these new imaginal selves of possibility, of finding each other. And a lot of my work now is about supporting that linking up and lifting up to serve our collective remembering and healing and the possibility, potential for our conscious evolution. And healing our relationship with Mother Earth is a vital, vital part of this.
It really is. Because as we realize, how deeply we are interconnected and how we are guided, nurtured, and supported by Gaia herself, right? There's a tremendous amount of healing that needs to take place with the human species and Mother Earth, right? And connecting with her. And, it's hard, sometimes to just really take in how we have behaved with Mother Earth. Yeah. And yet, there's always opportunity to start anew, to recognize, just as we do in a relationship with anyone, whether it's a loved one, a parent, a sibling, a daughter, a son, whoever, a friend, we can make mistakes, and then we can see our mistakes for what they are, and we can choose to move in a different way, in a different direction. That's one towards harmony, right? Which is ultimately what the healing process is. And you spoke about the importance of community here. I mean, this is, again, if we use the term biofield, we just talked with Dr. David Musum about the biofield, exploring what that is. And, at the recent Consciousness and Healing Initiative conference, we talked about the biofield of community, that when we do come together in community, it supports us when we come together in community with like intention, with open heart, with a collective focus to carry out some healing in the world, that we support each other. Like, that's actually vibrationally possible, not just psychologically possible, but vibrationally there is something that happens. And certainly we feel that at these types of gatherings. What advice would you have for those of us who are listening today thinking about this? What are ways we can start with supporting ourselves and carrying out our purpose, our change that we want to help bring to the world in the form of community? Many of us may live in different places and, so forth.
There are a number of, thank you. I mean, there are a number of things with this. First of all, that this emerging understanding of the whole worldview naturally supports us coming together. It naturally supports cooperation. And balance and appreciation and valuing of unity in diversity. So not homogenous communities, but look at an ecosystem. Look at a healthy ecosystem is abundantly diverse, and every being within that ecosystem has its place, and within that evolving impulse of that community. So I think there's a naturalness to this when we literally wake up and get beyond this myth of separation. The other thing I would suggest is that we perhaps see this. We talk about, in the whole worldview and unity community, we talk about acting local, feeling global, thinking cosmic, on the basis that by thinking cosmic in every day, just to feel into and experience into this wholeness, and then breathe it into our lived experience every day. So that is about coming together and in groups, and realizing that it's not about uniformity. Unity isn't about uniformity. It's how can we see through others' eyes, walk in each other's footsteps, to understand the other, so that we don't see the other as an enemy tribe. We don't see, for example, that if you have different political views to me, that you are a bad person, but that you just have different political views from me. So how can we come together to, instead of separate, to find ways of compromise, not compromise, which is lose-lose, but how can we come together with all our differences to compromise? I mean, when an orchestra comes together, you have all the musicians playing different notes on different instruments, and yet the music harmonizes. How can we, with open hearts, step towards each other? And we can do this, but it takes our intention. It takes our willingness to do it, rather than sort of, collapse into our own sort of fear-based perspectives, to just be willing to be vulnerable, be willing to trust, be willing to be open-hearted. And just a step each day brings us into that interconnection. And certainly when I've done that throughout my life, it's been miraculous in the way in which healing can happen. So rather than blame games and you did that, no, you did that, and there's enough of all of that to go around. It's, as you said, the journey of healing, whether it's individual or a species, begins with us taking responsibility for our choices and actually taking those choices and making those choices from a place of love rather than a place of fear.
Yes, and returning to that love. I've spoken to many people who they're light workers, they're light bringers, but because they are sensitive, they sometimes get weighed down by the negativity that they're bombarded with, whether it's through the, traditional media or just, the general malaise that we're seeing. And this isn't just quote in the ether, so to speak, right? We're seeing this actually manifested in mental disorders, emotional disorders across the
Absolutely.
globe, right? We are an unhappy race of beings right now because there is a lot of negativity surrounding us. And so we've talked about the biofield of community as being one way to strengthen our understanding that everything is and must come from love. Are there some personal practices that you can also share for those of us who, just when we wake up in the morning or before we go to bed or, in the middle of a work day or whatever, are there some particular practices that you found that are very useful for us to, again, reconnect with the cosmic to sort of fill our well so that we can move forward?
Very much so. And I would really invite, first of all, I think there are many paths up the same mountain. And so there are sort of paths, whether it's meditation or yoga, that work for very many people. And if they work for anybody, that's great. But walking in nature, it's dancing around the kitchen table, cooking for loved ones, these everyday things that just warm our hearts. What is it that is our bliss? What is it that brings us joy? What is it that helps to nurture us? Because when we nurture the love within us and that feeling of connection and that feeling of joy, then it's much easier for us then to share it with the world and with our communities. And for me, there's a wave that is love, joy, and gratitude. So when I feel love, it's easier for me to feel joy. When I feel joy, it's easier for me to feel gratitude. So at the beginning of the day, to invite people to perhaps spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes quietly, not rushing into the day, but quietly, and just feeling that sense of connection in whatever way works best for them. For me, it's what I call a universal heart attunement, where I move into the vibration and the awareness of the oneness of all that is, that I call the universal heart of love. And at the end of the day, before I go to sleep, I just give gratitude. And if it's been a really tough day, I can always find gratitude for at least one thing, and some days my cup runneth over and I'm crazy gratitude, crazy grateful. But I think beginning the day with love and completing and finding moments or as much in the day to be joyful about and completing the day with a conscious sense of gratitude allows that interweaving and that flow to just carry us forward. And then life carries us like a great river of adventure.
I love that, because that is so true. When we are surrounded by love, when we tune into love, things become more effortless, don't they? It's, because
Exactly.
Again, we're not working with the myth of separation. We're supported. we're connected and we're supported. And when we tap into that, all of a sudden it does become much more joyful. It's not so much of a struggle. Things are not so much of an effort because we truly are being carried and supported along the way. So important, Jude. And I want to thank you for all of the work that you do, all of the insights that you share with so many on, really a daily basis through your books, through your teachings, through the social impact work that you do. And I'm wondering if people want to connect with you further, what are the best ways for them to do that?
Thank you, Sharmini. Well, I've got a personal website, which is www.judecurrivan.com. But also people are very welcome to join our growing community of our growing unity community of the whole worldview. And that website is www.wholeworld-view.org. And we'd love them to join us on Facebook through that website as well. That would be wonderful.
Fabulous. Thank you, Jude. I'm sure many people will be reaching out to connect with you, to help you, have you help them foster their own conscious evolution. So thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time today to speak with us. It's always an honor and a pleasure to connect with you. And again, thank you for all the work that you continue to tirelessly do.
Thank and bless you, Sharmini, and thank and bless everyone who's with us. And I look forward to our ongoing adventures together.
Same here. Thanks, everybody, for watching, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for the Reuniting Science and Spirituality Summit, brought to you by the Shift Network. You can add every teaching and transcript to your personal library by visiting reuniting-science-and-spirituality.com/upgrade. To learn more about awakening to your full potential and together co-creating a world that works for all, visit theshiftnetwork.com.